Hello and welcome to the 19th Annual International Jewish Film Festival. I'm Rachel Appel, Special Projects Coordinator at JCC Rockland. We are joined tonight by several panelists. Rabbi Kevin Hale, whom we met in the film, is joining us from Florida. His work includes evaluating and restoring Torah scrolls, scribing other sacred items, and teaching about the scribal traditions of Judaism. Since 2012, he's been one of the approved scribes for the Czech scrolls that belong to the Memorial Scrolls Trust. The director and producer of Commandment 613, Miriam Lewin, is joining us from Brooklyn. Her films include documentaries about teaching the arts, housing discrimination, and the Yale Glee Club. She also produces classical music radio programs. You might have heard some of her Jewish holiday specials hosted by violinist Yitzhak Perlman. And she manages the world's oldest opera supertitle business. We're also joined tonight by two of our local Rockland rabbis, Rabbi Daniel Pernick, who has been the rabbi at Beth-Am Temple since July of 1985, and Rabbi Benjamin Scharf, who has been the rabbi at the Reform Temple of Rockland since July of 2016. So Miriam and Rabbi Hale, I know both of you have several questions for Rabbi Pernick and Rabbi Scharf about the Memorial Scrolls Trust Torahs housed at their synagogues. But I first wanted to ask the two of you about your journey making this film together. How did you meet and where did you get started?
We met a long time ago because Rabbi Hale and I are actually first cousins. So I have known about his work as a scribe for a long time. But a few years ago, he started telling me about his work on this particular set of scrolls, and I was fascinated, and I was also at a point where I was ready to do something independent. All my films had been for clients. I had never made one by myself. And I said, oh, that sounds like a film. And he had no idea what he was getting into.
I declared I wanted to be the most cooperative film subject that you ever had. And it's, just on a personal note, obviously alluded to in the film about our family background as relatively secular from Germany. And this has been just such an amazing vehicle for my cousin and I to really connect with some of the deepest roots of our being Jewish that I think no one else in the family talks about too much. So that's been exciting.
And I'll just say, you might recognize this picture from about 3 minutes and 30 seconds into the film. That's Kevin's mom, and that's my dad, and those are our grandparents. And that was right before they left Germany, like the week before they left Germany, 1939.
Wow. And so what is your favorite part of the film? Is it exploring the family history, or was it traveling with Rabbi Hale to the different synagogues?
I think my favorite part is the look that you see on people's faces in the congregations when they get close to the Torah scroll and Rabbi Hale starts to explain things and they had never made those connections. I mean, I know I wasn't bat mitzvah. I was never close to a Torah scroll. And when I see how people connect with it, that's my favorite part.
Yeah. This didn't make it into the film, but I was a Hebrew school dropout myself about 6 months before my bar mitzvah, and it's that scene of the girl talking about reading from that scroll at her bat mitzvah that is probably my favorite scene, and she can't quite explain why. It just is that compelling.
Which is going to make me break in and say, Rachel, I understand you were that girl. You read from a Czech scroll at your bat mitzvah, and you are the first person I've met who has had that experience. And I hope would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So when I was watching the film, I saw that girl and all she said was, "It's so cool." And I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is really cool. And when Rabbi Pernick gave me the option, okay, you can read out of the Holocaust Torah or one of the other Torahs, I said, of course I want to read out of that one. And thinking back, it's because it connects you to that Jewish lineage that you don't even think about when you're 13 years old, that you're not even really aware of, but you know that this is an important Torah and this is an important moment in your life that you get to read out of this historic artifact from such a terrible time that survived the Holocaust.
Did you make that part of your ceremony? I mean, did you talk about it? Or Rabbi Pernick, did you talk about it during the ceremony? And do you do this regularly? Do B'nai mitzvahs at your temple do it regularly?
I will confirm that I don't remember exactly what I said. Maybe Rachel does, but it may be in one of my old computer hard drives somewhere. But prior to the pandemic, we did reserve that scroll for our B'nai Mitzvah who made the commitment to continue their Jewish education beyond Bar Bat Mitzvah through what we call our confirmation program in the 10th grade. So not every student was offered that choice. They were offered the choice, but they had to make the commitment to continue their education.
I have to admit, I don't remember either everything that was said, but I do remember making the commitment, and going through confirmation was a very big deal for me. I was very close with my friends that I graduated with, and continuing through 10th grade meant, I think, a lot. And I learned so much more in those 3 years after turning 13 and becoming a bat mitzvah.
So I understand that each of you rabbis, you have 2 scrolls from the Memorial Scrolls Trust at your temples. And so I'm curious about how you use them and why you have 2. And maybe Rabbi Sharp, you could tell us.
So yes, at the Reformed Temple of Rockland, we do have 2 Torah scrolls from the Memorial Scrolls Trust. And the reason for that is we are actually the merger of 2 legacy congregations, Temple Beth El in Suffern and Temple Beth Torah in Nyack. And each of them had a Memorial Scroll Trust, and we received permission to keep both of the Torah scrolls. So one of the ways that we remember our Torah scroll from Temple Beth El is, first, it was part of the procession. They marched all of the Torahs from Suffern to Nyack. So that predates my time here, but it was, there's a wonderful video of it, and we have a new home for it, and it's on display. This is, unfortunately, the Torah we're not able to take out very much, in part because we suspect, one of my predecessors, Rabbi Mass, suspects that it was stabbed multiple times with a bayonet as a way of rendering it to be not just unkosher, but so you can't really use it. So the only time we really take it out is whenever we commemorate Yom HaShoah. So it's a way of demonstrating our commitment to that community, and we're also able to show the scars. And we made the conscious choice not to have it repaired to demonstrate the violations that were committed unto the Jewish communities, of course, as we know, many of whom no longer exist. And then the other Torah scroll, the one that we have from our legacy of Temple Beth Torah, we actually had it become a kosher scroll. And the way we did it was we filled in the last letter on September 11, 2011, which was a way of commemorating, of course, the atrocity that happened here in the United States, but also connecting it to the larger narrative. That Torah scroll we take out on Kol Nidre as part of the Beit Din. We dance with it on Simchat Torah. And because it's a very tall scroll, we don't take it out for B'nai Mitzvah because it would be a little awkward for our students to process around with. So instead, we take it out on confirmation. And so our confirmands who've demonstrated their commitment to continuing their Jewish education read from the 10 Commandments. So we do that every Shavuot.
Very nice. I love that range of considerations and uses. Rabbi Pernick, how about your temple?
So we have 2 scrolls. The first one also predates me. It probably came to our temple a little over 50 years ago. We had a rabbi who was from Germany, and we really don't know all of the details, and he was really only the rabbi for a very relatively brief period, just a few years. But in that time, he did bring a very large scroll. But as many Sofrim, many scribes have told me who have worked on our Torah scrolls over the years, it's an incredible Torah in that it's very large, but the parchment is very thin, but strong. And they said that they really don't make parchment like that anymore. So even though it is our largest Torah, it is not our heaviest Torah. And one of the things that we regularly do with this Torah, in addition to using it for services and for certain B'nai Mitzvah, on Simchat Torah, we unroll this Torah scroll from the front of our sanctuary. We open up our interior walls and we go to the very back of our social hall, and we have congregants facing each other with their hands outstretched in front of them, and we literally unroll the Torah over their hands. And our cantor reads the very end of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, or occasionally it's me, and then one of us goes all the way back to the front of the sanctuary and we read Breshit. And everybody is seeing, literally the Torah right in front of them. Sometimes people are able to spot, their bat or bar mitzvah portion or other significant parts. And then I have the unenviable task of rolling up that entire Torah while the cantor is singing and trying to get it ready so that we can continue our service. So that's the large Torah scroll. It is from a city called Vlasim, V-L-A-S-I-M. It was written about 1850. Now, our second Torah scroll, we only got about 4 years ago. And it's a long story, which I'll try to make very brief. My wife's parents were Holocaust survivors. They actually met in the Langenbielau concentration camp. And my father-in-law was very, very active in Holocaust programming in Boston. His name is Jacob Birnbaum, of blessed memory. So this Torah scroll was part of their Orthodox synagogue in Newton Center, Massachusetts, Congregation Bethel, Commonwealth Avenue. And as things happen in synagogues over time, they ended up getting a new display. Somebody donated and they had a new display. And we wrote to the synagogue. I talked to the rabbi, and we wrote to the to London for the Memorial Scrolls Trust to see if we could get permission, because my father-in-law was actually the one who had originally requested this particular Torah scroll, a very, very small one, which is part of a sculpture which hangs in our lobby. That literally, when you come into our building, you come in the door, right in front of you, you see this very large sculpture with the Holocaust Torah in the middle. We don't use it often, but we have used it on occasion. We were told that it was not kosher. The only thing I can see that's wrong with it is it's kind of faded. But, if I was 220 years old, I'd probably be a little faded too. So I personally have no problem using it, and we do intend to use it occasionally, but probably not for a bar mitzvah day.
So rabbis, do you have questions for Rabbi Hale? So Soferic questions about how to care for your Torahs, or how he does what he does?
I could just jump in Soferically, if I may, before that. So many of the Czech memorial scrolls are very large and written on incredibly thin and strong parchment, like the one that you referred to. And it's surprising. And the most typical scroll that we find in synagogues in this country were written more like 100, 120 years ago in Eastern Europe, and they tend to be heavy and thick. And as much as these scrolls relate to a time, a very terrible time, 80 years ago, many of them were written in a time that speaks of wealth and art and craft. And really, it's remarkable that we are telling stories over the course of 200 years just in this session.
And actually, our small scroll, we were told, goes back. It's from a community. We actually have a whole booklet that we made up of it from private mystic.
I would love to see that booklet.
I would be glad to give it to you, give you a copy. And it goes back to 1800. So, yeah. It's 50 years older than the
Many
other.
are well older, and I mean, not to second guess another scribe, God forbid, but a scroll that's very tall and very thin suggests a scroll that's much older than 1850. And it'd be interesting to, you know, that you bring all four of your scrolls together and notice age and difference in styles, and it's fascinating.
If I could, I'd also note that there was a ceremony several years ago at Congregation Emmanuel in New York City, where we took our two Torah scrolls, and you know, they were on display for the community to see for a couple of hours. You're smiling, Miriam. Were you there? Or are you familiar with that?
We were there. It was really one of the most moving events of my life.
Yeah.
And that's actually the day when we filmed the interview with Jeffrey Orenstein from the Memorial Scrolls Trust. That was filmed upstairs at Temple Emmanuel in New York. Yeah.
Who has always been a pleasure to work with. And yeah, we were up there in the front and just watching just all these scrolls coming towards the beam. I mean, it was an incredible experience.
I think it was about 80 scrolls. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the trust will be marking its 60th anniversary.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had to do the math there. 60th anniversary in 2024, and they are planning a number of regional scroll reunions. So you may be getting an invitation to another one, or maybe since you have 4 right there, you'd like to host one.
Or at least the scrolls will get the invitations, and the rabbis can come along.
Rabbi Hale, if I can, I wanted to know when Rabbi Sharf mentioned the bayonet, you made kind of a face. Have you ever seen that sort
I
of?
made the face because just even the image of that is horrible. I haven't seen that kind of damage, and I wonder if there's evidence that is the kind of damage. You know, most I've looked at 100 or more scrolls of the trust, and when there's damage, it's often the damage that came from 20 years of being poorly stored in a damp basement, essentially, or a storehouse. And but if there's a story there, and maybe there's evidence in the way that it's damaged, I'd Rabbi Sharf would be really interested in seeing it if there's ever an opportunity. Just a photo. What a horrible image, and you know, it speaks to also. This was the other thing that went over my face is, should every one of the 1,564 Torah scrolls that were rescued be restored? And there's good reasons to restore ones, certainly that are close to being kosher and legible. But some of the ones that I've restored, you know, it is very specifically just to stabilize them so that they can be held and learned from, even if they're not read from as a kosher Torah. And certainly that describes some of the scrolls that you rabbis have.
I'm just curious if it's a different feeling when you're working on a scroll like that, or you have to, you know, kind of like an athlete, just, you know, a situation might be extra special. They have to kind of stay in a certain zone. Is it like that for a Sofer as well?
Yeah. What a great question. I think the answer is both. And you know, we adults are called upon to hold contrasting ideas, and as precious a legacy as it may be, it's a Torah scroll, and if it's not kosher, it's not kosher. And there are rules that the trust has about how we handle these scrolls, including really not changing anything. You know, especially Kabbalistic embellishments on letters, which are very common of scrolls from circa 17 something of that area. We are required to not add any and not to remove any in the course of restoring. So there's a lot that's special, and maybe the most special of all is that it's a Torah scroll, one that is like ones written 1,000 years ago, and ones that, God willing, will be written 1,000 years from now.
So as I learned from my previous congregation, We had one of those Torah scrolls that we discovered had the Kabbalistic embellishments, like the pay within the pay. And I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that school, that scribal school has sort of been lost.
You mean that way of writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am not aware that those are acceptable elements in writing a kosher Torah today. But I also live I'm a scribe in New England. I'm not living in communities where maybe those traditions are kept up, but I haven't seen them in scrolls that are newer than about 150 years old. And it's too bad. In a way, they're delightful, you know. The scribes are playing with the letters. They're not going outside the bounds of what is kosher, obviously, but there's room for a sort of playful commentary, possibly, on embellishing some letters. Often I say when we're looking closely at one of these Czech scrolls, you know, Rabbi Burdick, maybe while you're slowly rolling up, like really look closely and things can be discovered just by looking closely at the strokes of letters.
Absolutely. Well, I think most rabbis actually do look very closely because, you know, if nothing else, we have to find the parashah each week and where it begins. And, you know, we don't want to be up there in front of the congregation, whether it's in person or on streaming or, you know, whatever, and spend seconds or minutes looking for the portion. So, you know, I think we do notice, and we notice those differences. I personally don't understand what the differences are, but you know, and of course, I guess maybe you can answer. There are certain places where the letters, of course, just are gargantuan. You know, you have the hay that covers half of a line or things like that.
Right. There are, you know, a couple of handfuls of letters that are to be written small, some large. Most famously, I think the ayin and the dalet in the Shema and the first bet in Bereshit in the beginning, smaller. So, and then there are Kabbalistic traditions of other letters that would be written large and small. And then there's the scrolls where other ones are written large as well. You know, sometimes it's you know, we have a great interpretation of why in the Shema there's these two letters written large. Whether it's the one that says they make the word ed and witness and etc. And then there's ones that maybe we don't know, and I think this is part of the tradition that we have kept up this scribal lineage, and maybe that's even more compelling about what it means in an interpretive sense. Delicious, isn't it?
We're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank everyone for coming and to offer any final thoughts anyone has. This is about this discussion and about the fact that there are scrolls right under our noses here in Rockland.
Did I just mention, Rachel, that so often people feel that they're not allowed to see the Torah. And I always tell people, you know, and there are many people, especially women of a certain age, who were never permitted to read from the Torah. And they ask, and of course, just come up, we'll open it up for you after the service or whatever. I mean, this is the possession of the entire Jewish people. And I think I'm sure I can speak from Rabbi Sharp on this, and for most of our colleagues, that we are thrilled to share Torah with people in our congregations and our community. And there's a very wise rabbinic teaching, Ein habayshan lomed, the shy student doesn't learn. So don't be shy, just ask.
Our community is blessed with this wonderful heritage. Every B'nai Mitzvah, invite anyone who wishes to come up and take a look at the Torah. But if you are in our community and you want to see or interact with any of our Holocaust scrolls, feel free to give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to show it to you and teach you a little bit about these long lost communities whose heritage has been entrusted to us.
And for those who can't go and do it in person, I hope that the film Commandment 613 is a way to get up close with the Torah for you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, and thank you for supporting JCC Rockland and our film festival.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to meet you all.